It has been our aspiration to bring the best of the world in impact to all our stakeholders in India. And with our fourth and final masterclass of 2021 today, we believe we have indeed achieved the same. I'm Neha Gupta, Director of the Impact Future Project at Aspire Circle. As you may know, Aspire was founded in 2007 and is the largest impact collaborative in India, with over 400 CXOs engaged to help catalyze an Indian impact economy. Last year, Aspire launched impact assessments and ratings initiatives for corporates, funds, nonprofits, and CSR programs. Here is a short video for your better understanding of the corporate impact assessments by Aspire Impact. Thank you. Well, as you all know, investors and corporations around the world are in consensus that the journey to solving global challenges is graded and have converged around three categories of investing: responsible or ESG, sustainable, and impact investing. Collectively, as per GSIA, the Global Sustainable Investing Alliance, this impact continuum has attracted $59 trillion in 2020, almost half of globally professionally managed assets. Aspire Impact, with its impact assessments, is committed to ensuring impact transparency through standardized impact ratings, which subsume all ESG and sustainability ratings and certifications to support entrepreneurs and investors in their impact journey. Our Impact Future project, launched in November 2020, is a unique thought leadership platform which brought together over 200 business, investment, and nonprofit leaders to generate investment ideas and unlock private capital for public good, enabling India to embrace impact capitalism and indeed impact accounting. We have now released 4 research reports in the EdTech, FinTech, water, sanitation, hygiene, and waste management, and the disability and accessibility sectors. We will launch 4 more research reports by March 2022 in the sectors of agri-tech, femtech, renewables, etc. A special welcome to all our fellows, governors and elders, IFP leaders, co-chairs, knowledge partners, industry partners, and the Aspire staff. After three gripping masterclass sessions, the first with Sir Ronald Cohen, Chair GSG, and the second with Professor Robert Eccles, University of Oxford and former professor at the Harvard Business School, and the third with Professor Dwight Hopkins, the founder Director ESG Centre at the University of Chicago, our grand finale today features one of the most celebrated women leaders of the Impact universe, Cathy Clark. To introduce the conversation, I would like to invite Amit Bhatia, founder of Aspire. Amit is the founder and CEO of Aspire, formerly inaugural CEO of the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment and the founding CEO of India's Impact Investors Council. Amit, over to you.
Thank you, Neha and Cathy. Welcome to Aspire and to India, and welcome to all of you here. I see all our friends and fellows, and it's a pleasure to introduce to you the original goddess of the Impact universe, Cathy. Look, I've known her for a long time, and I can say this with great amount of certainty. I remember I was the IIRC CEO back in 14 to 17, and in 2015, 16, I don't know if Cathy remembers, but we met right here in Gurgaon. She was touring India, and I was obviously pleasantly surprised at her intricate understanding of the social entrepreneurial and impact investment ecosystems. And when I took on the GSG role, she was omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. She was there, and everyone wanted Cathy on their panels, working groups, and you will soon figure out why. Those of you who don't know Cathy, she's at the Duke University running what is called the Center for Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship, acronym CASE. But she has just so many accomplishments to her name. And because we want her to use her time up front before you start a Q&A with her to really talk about herself as a person, let me name a few. Look, one of the biggest, way companies can wear their impact on their sleeve is really B Corp, identity. Cathy helped develop those standards, which led to, B Corp recognition. Last year she was named the Social Innovation Thought Leader of the Year. She's launched books. She's launched two great, impact, courses, and you'll hear both about them during the day, including on Coursera, which has reached out to over 40,000 people around the world. And she's been a venture capitalist, she's been an academic, she's been a thought leader, a practitioner. And therefore, we feel this is the most apt way that we kept the best for the last. And we're going to end the year with the best gift we can give you this holiday season, Cathy Clark Unplugged. So Cathy, you'll get enough questions thrown at you. We have multiple CEOs here on this, panel. We have Purnima, I see Suresh Sethi, I see Mr. Ravi Kant, who is John Alex. You'll get many questions, coming your way. Let's start off, if you can just tell people who's Cathy as a person. I think, but let people get to know you so India can get to know you really, as intimately as they possibly can.
Well, thank you. First, I would just thank you. This is, it's very early morning for me, but with an introduction like that, I would get up every morning to get the boost. And you are very, very kind. Cathy, as a person, I grew up in Philadelphia, in the inner city, and my father was a community college professor. He taught mostly immigrant and low-income people, and he taught English. And he thought that was a way to unlock their futures. And I actually spent a bunch of summers when I was in high school working with him. He was doing a summer program to help high school students become more ready for college. And I didn't realize until about 10 years later that he actually was a social entrepreneur. Of course, we didn't know any of that language. But I was in there kind of doing the nuts and bolts of trying to get things done. And he was persuading everyone around him to join him to do something that didn't exist before, very entrepreneurially. And so I'm very grateful to have that formative experience. I've spent most of my professional life running up and down the East Coast of the US. I've worked in Washington, DC on policy. I've worked in New York at private foundations. I started a venture fund up there. And I've been at Duke now for about 13 years after a 10-year stint teaching at Columbia Business School. My very first class at Columbia was, I created the first social entrepreneurship class there, and it was a fateful day. It was September 10th, 2001 was my first day of class. And then of course the next day, New York changed quite a bit for everyone. But I have been obsessed with how you can use use business from entrepreneurship now up all the way through investing to make a difference in the world and the things that really matter to us. And you mentioned a few things that have come up. One of the reasons that I was so excited to join the B Corp team, and it wasn't really that when we started, was because I had seen a pattern of people with really good intentions trying to build mission into their businesses and having it be watered down when they got capital. And so this intersection of how do you lock in mission in a way that actually works? And then how do you work with capital sources who not just respect that mission, but actually promote it, has become kind of the through line for my career. So, the end of the story is that I've been a pretend professor for 13 years. I do not have a PhD. I'm a practitioner who stayed on too long, and run an impact investing initiative and fellowship. And as you mentioned, I've done a bunch of online courses so that I can kind of scale up what I've been doing and reach more people. But the through line is I know that business leaders and financial leaders have the power, have incredible leverage to make changes in our planet that we need to make. And so I'm just been pushing them along and supporting.
Thank you, Cathy, and more power to you. And as you can tell, we got 125 people here keen to learn more about impact. And let's jump right in. And I'm going to first, look at the impact entrepreneurship area and invite Purnima Khandelwal, who is a co-founder and CEO of INI Farms, to throw the first question at you. Purnima, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. Cathy, absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the conversation as it goes along. Good morning to you. Interesting that, the hat that you're wearing is different from, where you started. And, with you being a practitioner, it just lends so much more weight to the entire conversation around impact. So my question to you, Cathy, really is that, in your study of impact enterprises and impact entrepreneurs, what's been your experience? How do they scale? And have you seen them scale successfully? That's my first question. And added to that is, do you see a difference between organizations or enterprises that are completely focused on impact versus businesses that are completely for profit and then, kind of imbibe impact as a part of their journey?
Oh, two very, very good questions. Thank you, Purnima. I guess, the thing that I've seen, 20 years, if I look back, and think about all the different kinds of enterprises, and I've studied all of them. I've studied nonprofits and for-profits and hybrids and people who, change from one, or people who start, as you said, on one side and then kind of try to add the other. I think, the easiest success factor is when your mission aligns with your business model so tightly that you don't have to have extra effort to manage it. And I always tell people, it's okay if it doesn't. It's okay if there are, misalignments. Like there's a lot of ventures that, hire hard to employ people. Those are wonderful ventures. They are not aligned. You have to spend extra time and money training, a different kind of workforce and supporting them. So you have to manage it. But the simplest ones to scale are the ones where every time I sell a solar panel, I'm replacing some other kind of energy. And, often when it's in the product is the easiest. Your other question is kind of, which works better, locking it in at the beginning and declaring yourself a social venture and trying to navigate that, or, growing up and then integrating these practices. I think both can work very, very well. They have different challenges. Right. I hesitate to say you must lock it in from the beginning, because I actually think that there are different advantages. Right. I think of the social entrepreneurship and impact investing marketplace. I have thought of it very often over the past few years as kind of the R&D lab right? It's kind of if you're going to do it in a pure form, how far can you go? And you can invent things when you have complete control over an organization. You can say, we're going to create a salary cap, between the highest paid and the lowest paid, and it's going to be 5-to-1, and we're never going to change that. You can't do that for a publicly owned company. And so there's just a lot more room, and you can try things, and then other people can, those practices can kind of seep in. On the other hand, a large company, if it moves a little bit, can just have significant impact and scale, on what's going on. And it's one of the things that we talk about in our new course on impact management is that, there are different goals of impact, and none of them is weighted more heavily than the other. But, you can do a lot by, dialing a tiny bit for a very large company can have just as much impact as a small enterprise that's been around for 20 years and still hasn't, reached a large scale.
Very interesting, Cathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cathy. And I have two big businesses here, and I'm going to go to both of them. First, let me invite Suresh, the CEO of National Securities Depository Limited E-Governance, NSDL eGov. So Suresh, over to you.
Hey, Cathy. I hope I'm audible.
You are.
Very nice to see you, and a very good morning. As you said, it's early morning over there. And Amit keeps us all awake with his questions, yes. So I had a question for you that the regulators and policymakers in India, we had a report earlier called the Business Responsibility Report. And now we've come out with a framework which talks about business responsibility and sustainability reporting. And this has now been mandated for the top 1,000 corporates in the country by market capitalization. The intent is to bring greater transparency and to enable them to see the risks in the areas of sustainability and what opportunities are there. So we wanted to get a sense from you that from a policy standpoint, what are some of the best practices around the world? And secondly, how far are we from having an integrated reporting or impact accounting, which is getting mainstreamed? Because as a quick introduction, I represent a company which has been at the forefront of e-governance and putting out citizen-centric initiatives in the country. And we recently did an exercise with Amit to see the sort of impact we've created. But very clearly, as we look at various, sort of standards out there across the world, where do you see the convergence and how far are we from it? So it would be good to hear your views.
I love this question. Thank you. I don't have a crystal ball. I will tell you you asked just the exact same question that my students just asked me on my last day of my impact investing course, which was, will we figure, their question was a little narrower. They said, will we have figured this out in 2 years? And my answer was, well, that I can say no. that I know, but I don't know when. So there are more governments around the world who are starting to dial up, as it sounds like India has, the disclosure requirements, right, for companies. And that is something that it's easy for policy to start with, which is, can you be more transparent about X, Y, and Z? And that X, Y, and Z is different, right? As we've seen all around the world, people are playing a little bit, like the sustainable finance disclosure regulations in Europe have a taxonomy. I'm sure the ones in India are slightly different. In the US, we don't have anything quite yet, but we're hopefully working on it right there. So there are different jurisdictions basically saying, if we can encourage companies to start to disclose material factors around their impacts on people and planet, it's a start to be able to, understand the impact of these companies and perhaps the value of that, right? If you care to include that. I feel like if you back up a step, I feel like that is, in some ways, it's really important, but it's not the most important thing that's actually happening. It's just kind of it's the way the message gets translated that people can actually review it at scale, which is very important. So in our Coursera course that Amit mentioned, I don't know, Neha, if you have the slide that you could put up for us that I sent last night. This would be a good time. If not, I'll just talk. In our Coursera course, it's a course on impact measurement and management, and we looked across at all of the different standards for enterprises and investors and said there's 4 universal practices that if you follow these practices, you can adhere to all of the standards because they all share these things. And the four steps are setting your strategy, deciding what's important, integrating the strategy into your operations, and that's different whether you're an enterprise or a financial institution. Optimizing, basically looking at the information that you get back from your information loops and deciding what to do about it, deciding what you need to change, what you need to manage. This is a management function. It is not an information function, right? We don't reward companies for having great, for passing their audits, right? We reward them for the performance that they've actually managed and heralded into the world. And so the last step is reinforce. The reinforce step includes, just like the Aspire services, both internal and external stakeholder reports, so that you can actually create a feedback loop that is not just to the public, but also with the people that you're touching. When we look across these 4 steps, governments are playing very heavily on the last step. And that's okay. That's a great place to start, because it is the start to say to people, what do I have to do to disclose the right kinds of things? And I just feel like we are at the tip. I mean, I really do feel like this is the tip. People like 2 years is absolutely not where we are. What's interesting is, as governments set the ground for this kind of transparency, other institutions, we need a whole new set of intermediaries, and Aspire Impact is a very good example of one of them, that can help bring people along to the actual management choices that they need to make better decisions. And that, I think, is going to be the terrain of the next 5 to 10 years. It is, when you think about plain business, we have accountants, we have raters, we have, there's a whole infrastructure around, we have MBA programs that have historically taught people, how to manage those businesses and get good results. We are just starting to develop the same thing on the impact side. And I could go deeper into some of the hard points that are emerging in that. But I feel as if, this idea of third-party verification of either impact process or performance is a really good start.
Thank you so much. You made it sound very intuitive, but yes, I think there's still a journey to undertake over here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And Cathy, we're going to stay on the journey Suresh has put us on. And I have a feeling that Pratyush Panda, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer for Larsen & Toubro Infotech, a large listed company in India, you keep us in this domain. So Pratyush, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. Cathy, I hope you'll have a wonderful morning after this meeting, and you'll have a wonderful evening at our end in India. My question to you is with respect to first one, or with respect to race to zero, net zero, science-based target. In India, the concept is not growing. It's but today also, if we talk about ESG and sustainability, we are far behind. Tell us how to embed these things in our large corporates in India. Number one, especially with respect to net zero, COP26 and all. Second, how our listed companies, especially the large one, the 1,000 top listed, who will go through and now BRSR, will have impact, will integrate impact in their daily life, daily business life.
So, yeah, I think what you're referring to is not unique to India, which is, we have a whole bunch of language and a whole bunch of different things that are trying to consolidate and find each other, largely, right? I can't even tell you, even this morning, I was reading something where someone's saying, well, here's what I think ESG means, and here's how it's different from sustainability, and here's how it's different from impact. And I honestly have read 5 definitions in the past hour, right? And none of them match. And so as an organization, you're understandably trying to figure out, where do I put my effort and what do I trust in this, emerging landscape where I can't put my foot down. And that is quite understandable. I feel like one of the most important things that's happened over the past few years is there has been an attempt for the standards organizations to start to consolidate, to share definitions, and to acknowledge that there are some common practices within what they do. The structured network of the Impact Management Project had put about 20 of them together, and they have just launched a new website called the Impact Management Platform, which actually borrowed a little bit from our course and has organized the standards around a process. They have a circle, we have a rectangle, but it's the same process to kind of say, if you're an enterprise and you're trying to do this work, no matter what you call it, there are a few practice steps, right? They are very objective. And when you go to that website and you click on a practice step, it takes you through to all the standards that adhere to that practice. So you can kind of see what people might be judging you on. I do think that there's kind of, and I'm not sure it really matters, but I feel like there's also just this, ESG is just about risk, or ESG is just about operations, and impact is about positive, and right, there's all this cacophony of this at the moment. And I think the most critical kind of disagreement that's going on at the moment that I would highlight for you, that's beyond the nomenclature, which I think is important for an enterprise trying to decide what to do, is the definition of materiality. And I don't know, Pratyush, if you're, kind of followed this, but there are kind of two competing definitions of materiality right now in the international standards market. One definition is material factors are those that are material to your bottom line, right? It is material if it's going to affect your financial performance. And SASB has historically reduced the amount of disclosure that it requires to those factors that are most material. The other definition, in Europe, it's being called double materiality, which I don't like. I call it stakeholder materiality because to me, it comes back to the B Corp of the world, which is that business exists because of the people and planet that it works with and depends on. And if we're going to get to net zero, or if we're going to have a more equal and inclusive society in general, we have to think about how we're impacting people and planet, even if it's not in the interest of the business. And so this broader notion of stakeholder materiality, which is where the UN comes from with the SDGs, is that you as a business are responsible for all of the negative material impacts that you have on people. And the definition of material, which is hard, is it's whether it matters to them, not whether it matters to you, right? So if you are laying off people, even though you have the highest profits that you've ever had, right, that is a choice that may be making your bottom line better, but is probably making their lives worse. And you have a responsibility to understand the implications of that and to manage that, right? So those are the two. The stakeholder materiality is inherent in the Global Reporting Initiative. It's inherent in the UN SDG standards. It's inherent in the IFC standards and a bunch of others. And so those two worldviews are at the moment colliding. I'm afraid that the US is going to choose single because it's politically more expedient. But as an enterprise manager, what is material? What is your definition of what is material to manage? Is pretty important. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cathy. And I have a few people here who run more blue-blooded social enterprises. But before I go to them, let's get in a question on impact finance. So Nupur Gaba is here, Director Operations from an EdTech company, CareerWell. Nupur, over to you.
Thanks, Amit. Hi, Cathy. Good morning. Glad to meet you. So I wanted to ask that we are currently in our pre-Series A funding. So we're raising a Series A fund. So how should entrepreneurs evaluate impact investors versus commercial investors? So yeah.
Great question. Well, congratulations to you on raising your first institutional round, which is always a challenge. And so I know, I can imagine where you are, and I feel for you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one of the online, it's a course, but we call it a toolkit. One of the things that we put it out in 2016, was something called Case Smart Impact Capital, just casesmartimpact.com. And it is a online set of tools for people exactly like you who are trying to figure out what is the process that I go through to find, to get from, I think I want capital for my impact venture to this is the right deal for me to sign. And your specific question, we have a tool which allows you to, I think it's called an investor triage tool. It allows you to articulate what are the factors that are most important to you when you are talking to an investor to figure out whether they're a fit for you. There's a lot of stuff in the marketplace about how to make yourselves fit with them, but we see this as a proactive process. You are responsible for your enterprise, and the relationships that you set up with investors are often going to last you 5 or 10 years. So it's really, really important. And so we interviewed a lot of successful entrepreneurs who had raised capital and said, what's most important. And so this tool includes what we call kind of knockout criteria and fit criteria. And when you have an impact venture, you have more criteria to consider. You have what is their interest in impact reporting, and what do they require from us? There are certain funds who require specific metrics. Can we provide those? What is their alignment with our mission? If it's equity and they're going to take a board seat, do they understand the kind of customer or the kind of product that we're trying to sell, or are they going to support that? And so you just have more factors. And so I would very much recommend that you sign up. If you are interested in seeing this, go to Case Smart Impact Capital and sign up for it, and then go through. There's so much more in there, though. There are due diligence guides for you about what to ask the investor. There are term sheet guides for 13 different kinds of impact vehicles, where you can actually go through and say, what are the typical terms that I should be considering in this kind of deal, and where in the process should I talk to my lawyer about it? Where in the process do I have power? And so it's very much from the entrepreneur's perspective. And so I hope you'll check it out.
Thanks, Cathy. I would definitely check that out.
Thanks, Nupur and Cathy. So let's invite John Alex now. John Alex is the CEO of the Equitas Bank Holding Company, but he also oversees the CSR for the bank. John, you are here somewhere, right? John, do I see you? I thought I saw you. Okay, he may have dropped off. So Shivani, are you here, Shivani Agarwal? We're staying in the realm of microfinance. And Shivani, can you hear me? Can someone unmute both of them if they're unable to speak? John, Alex, and Shivani Agarwal. Okay. As we cannot get to hear them, let's go to Shashank. Shashank, I trust you are able to unmute. There you are. Okay. Shashank's CEO of a company which especially, social enterprise, which trains and upskills people with disabilities, and also co-chair of our D&I group. So Shashank, over to you. He's also in impact investor. He's been with Grey Ghost, Cathy, in the past, so he knows.
Oh, fantastic. Yep.
Go on, Shashank.
Thank you, Amit. Hi, Cathy. Morning to you, and I wish you a good day. It's a pleasure to be listening in. I've been thinking about how you think, where does this all fit in terms of the leaders, right? I mean, is it becoming a part of their KPIs? There's already been talk about ESG, there's CSR, India has some regulation around that. We've been talking about sustainability. So is this all sort of coming together? And then, of course, I have two other points. One is that, is there a role or an engagement that you're seeing with the teams that manage risks, right? Because not thinking about this, at least for some of us, is a risk that, non-progressive managers face, right? And then, of course, listening to Aspire and Amit talk about the chief, moving away from the classical definitions and thinking of a chief impact officer, right? What's the role that position is going to play in the scheme of things for all of this to come together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, but I will, pontificate as I have on other things. Yes, I do think that the roles and skills required to do this are starting to come together. Again, no matter what language you're using, it is a risk for companies not to be thinking about either definition of materiality, right? It is a risk, from a perception point of view. It's a risk from a hiring point of view. I don't have the stats, but I can tell you I was on one of the boards, the advisory boards for B Lab, which is the organization that certifies B corporations, for 10 years. Every single year, we had survey data saying that it was like twice as easy for any B Corp to hire almost anybody, because people love working for a good company, right? And so it was just like you won every negotiation because people were excited to work there. There is, obviously as disclosure and regulation comes, there's a risk of not adhering to that. And there's also just, the research base, which has over thousands of meta studies shown that companies who are attending to sustainability issues either have the same or outperformance compared to other companies. And people can pontificate about why that is. They're great managers. They're thinking more broadly. Your second question is kind of, is there a new role emerging, a chief impact officer kind of role? I hope that will be true. There is another group within our business school. And we actually have somebody who is probably the number one person in the country who looks at sustainability jobs in large corporations. She's written several books on it, and she's kind of up on all of it. And I actually was reading a blog she wrote yesterday where she was saying, there are more jobs than ever before in these, but they're hard to find because they don't use the same language. Right. And so there's a confusion factor in matching talent with function right now. Saying sometimes it's called an analyst and sometimes it's called an associate. It's almost never called a chief anything. That is, confusing kind of what is the level, what is the experience I have to have. She pointed out that almost all of these jobs right now say that you have to have 15 to 20 years of experience. And she said, honestly, I've been doing this for 20 years and I can count on two hands the people who have that many years of experience. Right. And so we have to acknowledge that, there's a new generation coming that is bringing these skills in a different way from many people who have already been inside these roles, and that, maybe you don't call it chief so that you can hire somebody just a little bit younger, but they have to have the emotional intelligence and the connection skills. The other thing I often tell my students is this is not a reporting job. If someone offers you a reporting job, it's the wrong job. Right? What you really want is a change management job. What you want to do is have the ear of the C-suite to say, what is really happening inside this company that we want to drive? If you look at the way Danone or some of the other, really, really leading companies in this area have done this, it goes straight to the top. If you're at a desk, 8 levels down, just collecting data on spreadsheets and trying to make it pretty, that is not the right job. And so I think I completely agree with you. I think we need to elevate this function, and I think we need to give it the professional gravitas that it requires. And we also need to realize that it's new for almost everyone to do this very, very well.
Yeah, and I guess therefore the importance of training or preparing for it, right?
Yeah, and so
you said, just leaving it to our being able to figure it out on the job or whatever.
I think there's a lot of that, right? I think there's a lot of kind of, I'm just going to take a good manager. We've seen this in impact investing as well in some of the larger, finance firms. For the first 10 years was, let's take a good person who ran the debt division and put them in social finance and, see what they do because they're a good manager. And they are, but they're on a really steep learning curve, for those first 5 or 10 years versus, Goldman acquiring, a company that actually knows how to do this and creating their whole division around it, right? So this kind of acknowledging that there are skills, there's different ways you can do this. You can hire individuals, you can acquire other companies. It's one of the reasons that I was so excited about our Coursera training. And so maybe this is another 2-minute just to explain what that is and how it relates to your question, which is we were approached by the UN Development Program, which is the creator of the Sustainable Development Goals, to say, can you help both enterprises and investors learn how to adhere to the new standards that are coming out? And the standards are standards of practice. They're not standards of reporting. And so people need more of a how-to. Right? It's not a check the box. Did I say this? Did I say this? It's what did you do? How did you engage with your stakeholders? What did you do at the board meeting? Did you actually discuss what to do about the fact that this indicator was too low? And so, we created this online course that's 10 hours. It's completely free. It's on Coursera. The URL is imm4sdgs.com, which I'll put in the chat when I have a second. And we have already over 5,000 people who have enrolled in the course. And I've had at least 2 firms come to me, and it's only been up for 2 months, come to me and say, we're now requiring this of everybody we hire, because it's just a level setting. This shouldn't be so mysterious. We've created, like, several of the questions, we've created all this vocabulary that makes this seem so complicated, when it really isn't. It's management, and it's management in a slightly different way, but it's not hard to do. And so I'm really excited, and thank you for giving me that question to, there's the slide. So, this is the framework for the course, is that each week, it's a 5-week course. But you can do it in your own time. It's self-paced. You can start anytime, end anytime. Each week you go into, how do I set strategy around the particular outcomes that I care about? How do I integrate that? How do I actually make decisions? And when I'm on a lot of boards for impact invest organizations and others, I've actually spent a lot of my time on this optimize step, which is, what is the data that you are giving me as a governance body, a representative? What is the data you're giving me? And do I trust that you are making the best decisions you can with it? Because that's when the change actually happens. The change actually happens when you make better decisions. And then the reinforcement. And, one person can help different people across the organization do this. In a very large organization, it's going to take more than one person. But this is what we're excited about, is to kind of level the playing field, which is why we made it free.
Thank you. We could continue for a very long time, but I'll send it back to Amit so that others can come.
Great.
Yes, although because we had a C-suite, discussion, so I'm tempted to bring in Mr. Ravikant right now, although I like to hold him back to help us close this. And those who are, I'm sure everyone on this call has heard or met Mr. Ravikant at some point in time, is the former CEO and vice chair of Tata Motors, one of the most, revered companies in the country. So Raviji, as you hear all this, I wonder if you have a question for Cathy or things you might want to share. Can someone unmute Mr. Ravikantji? Yes, thanks. Raviji, over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I'm very impressed by Cathy, your breadth of knowledge as described by Amit, and I'm witnessing firsthand. But I think even more impressed by your infectious enthusiasm and passion for the subject, which really lends a lot of color and a lot of, I would say, better understandability of the subject matter that we are discussing. So let me put it this way, that whenever there is a new trend, a new change, a structural change in industry or anything, it throws up a lot of winners and losers. And mostly it's the big guys who, the winners, erstwhile winners become losers, and the new guys come up and become winners. A case, an example, I would say, is auto industry, with which I'm familiar, is undergoing a structural change, and it is throwing up, therefore, as we can all see, emerging winners, those who have going for more ecological, I would say, concern for the planet, and those who want to go into put their bet on, say, electrification of vehicles for as a consequence or as an answer to that. They are beginning to gain a lot, as you can see in case of the new company in the US, which has market cap of next 5 companies combined together. And the person has become, his enterprise value is more than $1 trillion. And he's just been named as the Man of the Year by Time magazine. So Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So he has taken a lot of risks. He's foreseen better than others that, okay, this is the way trend is going to be, and therefore let me put a lot of might behind it. I have got a lot of might, so let me put it behind this idea and make it succeed. And I think he's done a great work so far. Others are catching up. It's not, others are very, very big, whether it's Toyotas of the world or or Volkswagen of the world or General Motors of the world. They're catching up, but they are definitely behind him. No question of that. But they have the advantage of scale. Now the question will be, who will be ultimate winner? It will be Elon Musk or it will be these companies. Time alone will tell. But from the past experience, it has been shown that whoever takes the lead in this change, who becomes the change agent, also acquires a lot of mantle of leadership in that particular thing. So this is, I'm giving just by way of example. Similarly, the impact capitalism or social capitalism or whatever name you want to call it by is a structural change which is happening in capitalism. And it is no more only bottom line. It is something more than bottom line. Again, by whichever name you want to call it by. It is something more, something beyond, which we don't have at the moment yardsticks to measure that in terms of financial terms. And therefore, it is somewhat confusing. And as you have rightly said, a lot of standards are being made. A lot of people are working at it. And eventually, maybe over 10, 15 years' time, we will also begin to evaluate in a simpler terms, in terms of money, if I may say so. Is, okay, what is the impact of what I'm doing in terms of money? Because it is making, by simplifying things, that we will be able to make it more understandable to people, and therefore get much better and stronger buy-in. Now, as I'm coming back, my first thing is any change will throw up winners and losers, and so will this. Now, what do you think, if you were to pick 2 or 3 things, is if I want to be the winner category, what is it that I should be doing? At the same time, I cannot divorce myself too much from today's conventional thinking, if I may say so, or today's assessment of my success, the definition of success, which is there by quarterly results or whatever you have. So what are the, say, 3 things which will say that I should begin to take it far more seriously and therefore become a cut above the rest, and therefore take leadership, but not be too far in advance, so that which may have disadvantages, but certainly half a step or 1 step ahead of others?
Great question. Several thoughts occurred, which are not actually answering your question while you were talking. I loved I'll give you the thoughts, and then maybe the 2 or 3 things will percolate as I talk. I loved your differentiation between, there's a grand change happening in the impact economy and around capitalism, whether we call it impact capitalism or just capitalism itself, kind of migrating and changing. It's not happening equally, right? It is little sparks that are flying around, and there are some people who are leading that, like diving into it full bore. And there are others who are, really can't take the risk of leading or need to follow, right? And need to say, when this is, we saw this with the B Corp movement as well. One of the first companies that we went to when we were creating B Corps was Patagonia, and they said, absolutely not, which sounds funny now because they are one of the prime leaders of that entire movement, have just announced yesterday that their entire company exists to make the world better, not to have profits. So they are, definitely on a leader and a tilter in a different direction. But at the time they said, we don't believe that you're significant. We don't believe that this is going to actually make any difference, because we don't want to be the only one, to kind of go off in this crazy new direction. And that's not irrational at all, right? For companies to say, we don't want to be the poster child for this because we're not sure we're going to do it well. This is just, going to basically raise our risk in a whole bunch of ways that we don't even know we can control, right? So that's quite scary. I think the other thing that you talked about that I thought was interesting was, do we need to put a dollar value on impact in order to compare it across companies and to make more companies comfortable with following? And there are a bunch of efforts. I use a fancy term for them in the training, which is called normalization, which is, what are the different techniques that you can use to start to create comparable variables across companies on these things. There's been a tremendous amount of history of the past 20 years of using these standards and reporting different things every single time, which makes them completely incomparable. And monetization of creating a dollar value for impact is only one of those. And there's some people working on that. I think it's far off. There are other things that you can do, which is you can create rating systems, right? So, or you can create certifications like the B Corp, where you get a score, right? So everyone's on a score from 0 to 200, and you very quickly can compare the impact of those organizations on their stakeholders, not just on each stakeholder, but as a whole. As a whole, this company is a 120 and this company is an 80, and that means something. And it doesn't have to be equal to dollars to mean that. I think the B Corp, you can also do it through categorization. You can kind of say it's this kind, and this kind, which is another thing that's happening in the marketplace. So, there's a bunch of different techniques to do that. I feel like if I were a company not willing to lead, but wanting to follow and be a very good corporate citizen, what are the 2 or 3 things I would do? One is I would figure out which of my stakeholders are having the worst experience as a result of my activities. Who am I hurting? Probably unknowingly, probably not on purpose. If I'm manufacturing, am I putting waste into the groundwater in certain communities? Am I paying everybody a living wage? Like, what are the worst things that I actually may be doing for the people that my business touches or the planet? And how well am I managing those right now? That's the first thing I would do, because that's a risk. And that's often what ESG screens are about, but really doing that in a broad way. The second thing I would do is I would say, what are some of the commitments that I can gather my teams, and that's not just the C-suite teams, but the whole teams of the company, around things that we want to do positively that get people jazzed, that are in our control, right? So impact for a decade was only about the positives. ESG has been only about the negatives. You need to put those two together to succeed and be a winner in this marketplace. What are the few things? They could be SDG outcomes, they could be, racial equity outcomes, they could be net zero outcomes. What is the thing that gets your selection of people the most excited that they can actually start to build together as part of your business? And then the third thing I would do is I would select a very good third party to help us develop those two things. So that you're not doing it on your own, and so that you can figure out kind of as things change, because things are in motion right now, that you're not depending on your own internal staff to figure out this huge smorgasbord of international standards and movements, but that you work with a third party who can regularly help you do that. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Okay, Cathy, thank you, Raviji. As we come up the last 7 minutes, let's collect a couple of questions. Cathy, I got one. I know Dr. Shuchin Bajaj, who's a very senior healthcare exit leader in the country. He's got one. But I think the one thing you should answer before you leave today, Cathy, is because as part of this UNDP, you would have elaborately thought through this structure of ESG, that is responsibility, sustainability, or impact investment, and the ABC bucket that the IMP created. How are you advising companies to think about these 3 buckets? Are you keeping them separate?
Yeah.
Integrating them?
I actually think so. So I don't know if everyone on the call is familiar with the ABC bucket. So the Impact Management Project created these classifications, and I and a bunch of other people helped them do this. So I've been part of this for a very long time. But the idea being, and I was just talking about it before, if you can start to compare investments to like things, it's easier to figure out whether you're performing. And so what we realized is people often, kind of use asset classes as a way of organizing, right? It doesn't tell you whether something's going to perform, but it does tell you it has the same characteristics, right? If it's real estate or if it's private equity or if it's private debt, it has some of the same characteristics. So we're trying to do the same thing with impact and say, what are the most salient characteristics of impact? The ABC is a dramatic simplification. And the idea is that an A is an impact, is where your goal is to reduce harm. A B is when your goal is to benefit a stakeholder and do something good for them, which most B corporations are doing. And a C is when you're actually trying to contribute to a solution, which means you are taking a population for whom they have an outcome that is below an acceptable threshold. So they are underserved in some way, and your activity is driving it above that threshold, and that you can prove that. So what it's done is it's taken away all the ESG impact language and said, let's just talk about what you're actually doing. And so what we do in the training, and I believe this, is that you set your goal. Let's say I want to do net zero. Is that an A, B, or a C? It's probably an A, right? You're driving down your carbon emissions to the point where you are net zero. What do you need to do to adhere to that? And there are different practices of what you need to measure and compare yourself to, depending if you're an A, B, or C. A is the easiest. You're comparing yourself to yourself. I know what I emit. How do I reduce that over time? I don't have to go out and do a peer study and compare it to all these other things. I just compare it to myself. The C is the one where you actually have to collect data. You have to know that that population is underserved. You have to have a benchmark for that. You have to figure out how to show that you have made a differential impact. That's either at additionality or contribution, depending on the funny language that people use. And you have to actually have some data that shows that to claim a C. And so what we've created, and we bring the ABCs throughout the 4 steps of the training to kind of say, you're going to ask different questions about optimizing, depending if you're an A, B, or C. You're going to report on it differently, depending if you're an A, B, or C. But it helps people understand. We're not saying that every impact has to do a control study. It depends on what your goal was. I hope that helped, Amit. It's easier with a little bit of graphic, but that's the verbal version.
Right. And I want everyone to hear it in your words. So last question to Shujan Bajaj. Go, Shujan.
Thank you very much, Amit, and thank you very much, Cathy, for such a wonderful session. I have the burden of the last question. I don't know if I'll be able to live up to it, and especially following Ravikant sir is a tough task for anybody. We run a group of hospitals in small towns and semi-urban rural areas of North India, and of course the population there is quite underserved. Uttar Pradesh, one of our biggest states, is bigger than the US in terms of population, and the healthcare facilities there are nothing to write home about. But we've been talking with a lot of impact investors. We've actually had 3 rounds of investment, but they were not really impact investors. They had some impact targets, as they call them. But each and every impact investor that we go and talk to, finally it's the IRR that they, it all boils down to. As you said, the dollar value is something that's really not clear to anyone on how do you really assess what's the impact dollar value in addition to the quarterly numbers and the Excel sheets that you produce. So I do think that the outcomes of the comprehensive impact assessments, like the Aspire one that that Aspire conducts, it provides a roadmap to organizations to consistently improve their impact performance. So how are the consultants getting onto this impact bandwagon? Do you see any discussion of corporate impact performance yet, or of what kind? And is there any real effort to put, as you said, dollar values onto corporate assessments and their valuations as the impact investment funds look at them?
Yeah, so I heard a bunch of questions there at the end. That was a lot. So let me just see if I get it. So one was, what is the consulting industry doing about this? The second I missed, and the third one was dollar value. What was it? Was there another one in there?
I know that's it. Yeah, the 2 questions.
That's it. Okay. So the consulting, yes, they are trying. My read of the situation, at least in the US, which I know the best, Europe a little bit less well, and then Asia and Africa not very much at all. Latin America as well. So you're just constraints of my knowledge, but my general read is that there are boutique shops that are developing with excellent expertise about how to get in there really fast and figure out what are the management changes you can, what are the dials you can turn to kind of get yourself in a flow that really work, and that most of the larger consulting firms are a little bit late to the game and have not figured out how to do this very well. I would love for them to prove me wrong, so I'm going to say that statement and see what happens. Your second question is kind of where are we in the monetization effort? There's an amazing project at Harvard that Amit is very familiar with called Impact Weighted Accounting. George Seraphim and others have been working for some years on trying to figure out if you were going to change the price per share of a company, if you were trying to change the value of what that company has, and you were going to basically add to it the value of its positive impact and take away from it the value of its negative, how can you do that? And they've done that for some segments of companies, and they're still developing it. Most impact investors are not looking for that information. And you've found that in your own experience. Most impact investors are looking for very strong businesses that align with their expressed impact goals that they have agreed on with their stakeholders, right? So the most important thing when you're talking to an investor is, what is your actual definition of impact? Can you share with me your investment policy statement that deals with impact or sustainability? Can you show me, or can you tell me, or can you share your impact report with me to understand? We have a little scale in our Case Smart Impact Capital training saying that there's 5 different kind of flavors of impact investors and what they want. It ranges from, I just want to know you're in the right industry, to I need to know that you have proven impact, right? And mostly government and DFI, mostly government is all the way on the right, and most impact investors are pretty much on the left. And it's making a movement as some of those impact investors are adhering to other standards like the IFC 9 operating impact principles. Those investors are going deeper. And if you want to see kind of what is the flavor of how they're going deeper, I would highly recommend the latest Blue Mark report. Blue Mark is an intermediary that has emerged to verify impact investors that are adhering to standards. And you can get a very quick sense through some of the graphics in their latest report of what investors are doing. But for the most part, I think your read is entirely correct. Impact investors are investors. They need to see the bottom line, and then they need to see some compelling evidence that you are reaching the goals that you set, and that varies. But the key to it is setting yourself up to have some information flow as as you integrate and optimize. What are the actual metrics and variables that are most important to the impacts that you're having, and you can learn more about that in our training in a great deal of detail, if that's of interest to you. This shouldn't be so hard. It shouldn't be so mysterious, and so we're hoping to make it a little easier.
Thank you very much.
And Shuchin, and I'm going to give it to Neha to help raise a word of thanks and close us. Thank you, Cathy, so much. Neha.
Thank you, Cathy, and thank you all for your lovely questions. Well, before I sign off, I would like to tell you that this was streamed live today on YouTube, and the session is available for anyone to go revisit. Before I close, I would just like to introduce a little video to further strengthen our ecosystem. We have now launched our Impact Specialist Program as of February 2022, alongside University of Chicago. So there's a short video here for our future CIOs, or the future Chief Impact Officers. With the video, I'd like to thank you all for joining today and for giving us your time. Cathy, thank you very much for this enriching and relevant session today.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
Since the beginning of this century, with the advent of Millennium Development Goals, triple bottom line, principles of responsible investment, and Nobel Prizes for Muhammad Yunus and Al Gore for social entrepreneurship and climate action respectively, we have seen the momentum built around a global impact movement, which will bring measurable impact alongside risk and return to the forefront of business, investment, policy, and consumption decisions.
Technology enables us to measure the impacts of companies in a granular way and to analyze their impact performance in a similar way to their profits. Some governments will mandate the publication of impact-weighted financial accounts.
Impact investing came into being, where you come up with a very clear statement, I want to make impact, and then you demonstrate how you will make an impact. And an investor who chooses you because you are doing these two things makes you an impact investor.
So yes, the crisis has made all of us shift direction.
We talked about the chief impact
Officer. It's the common name, but others may have Chief Engagement Officers. There are ways to be trained for people who hold that C-suite office. I look forward to being there the last week of February 2022, where we will be launching this week-long training to develop leadership, particularly around Chief Impact Officers and a whole new leadership.
Regulators to ensure compliance, manage ESG sustainability and impact risks, deliver optimized impact-weighted profits, manage organizational impact branding, innovate, be future-ready, and demonstrate highest levels of global citizenship. They must be able to design, build, scale, and manage impact. They will be the future Chief Impact Officers.
Thank you all for joining, and we'll call it a day today. Thank you again, Cathy, for the wonderful session.
Thank you. It was fabulous. Thanks so much. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Thanks, Cathy.